Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I'm Tahir Dhindsa and you're watching SDTV. Environment is a global issue and there are so many stakeholders to take all of them on a single platform and devise a policy and devise a mechanism for rolling out policy and its execution at the ground level is a mammoth task. For that, every year or every now and then we hear of the conference called the Conference of Parties COP, and there was a COP in Paris, which is we call it at a watershed. They promised that private sector was contribute $100 billion in the private and the official sector, and so just to combat the climate, carbon credit, whatnot, but nothing materialized. Then last year we saw Pakistan pass through a very mammoth flood, very big disaster. They say that losses were about to the tune of 30 billion US dollars, and that was taken well, very ably. A minister at that time, Sherry Rehman, presented it, and the whole world rallied around to compensate, but not much has come. Now the COP is again coming in Dubai, and what we expect, are we in a position globally, the parties are in a position to take forward the agenda and get something on? We have an expert with us, Shafqat Kakakhel, who was the executive secretary of the UNCCC, I'm the founder, and he served in India as our Deputy High Commissioner and Foreign Service. So he has a vast experience, especially of the environment because of the UNCCC. Shafqat Kakakhel sir, very warm welcome.
Thank you.
Just tell us something about this COP, which is in the offing, which is very close by.
Yeah, what we are now um, looking forward to is the 28th annual climate conference, and now it's increasingly called the Climate Summit, which is actually the conference of parties, which all the countries of that are members of the United Nations happen to be members, parties to the Convention on Climate Change, 1992. So this is the 28th Conference of Parties, or COP 28. These conferences have been hosted from country to country. This year it's the United Arab Emirates, and they have uh, prepared for a huge conference. They are talking about 80,000 people. I'm not sure if they will get, if we will get 80,000 delegates. We'll get somewhere between 45, 50,000 delegates who will represent governments, the private sector, the non-governmental organizations, the United Nations system, and the civil society interest groups, because climate change has comprehensive impacts. The impacts of climate change will be felt by every individual, by every economic sector, by every branch and field of life. So that is why you have thousands of organizations which look at climate change and health, climate change and labor welfare, climate change and energy, climate change and this and that. So this conference is being held against a very sobering global climate. Forget about the political situation. Although the political situation
It's sobering also.
also has impact, and I will tell you what the impact is. Uh, Basically, uh, what we have seen in 2022 and 2023 is an extraordinary increase in the number, in the duration, and in the intensity
of the events.
of climate-induced extreme events. I'm referring to floods and droughts, sea level rise, heat waves, um, wildfires, storms, uh, and uh, and various other abnormalities. Earthquakes and all are not related to climate change. There is no country in the world this year. 2023 has been described as the hottest year. July was the hottest month in recorded history. They're talking about 120,000 years. And there's almost every place in the world experienced either a flood or wild fires, forest fires, or long periods. India, about 6 or 8 states of India experienced various degrees of drought. So they will have to be provided with food produced elsewhere. Luckily for them, India has very substantial food reserves. So that is one thing. The other is that the gap between what the scientific community is advising in regard to the drivers of climate change and the action on the ground is growing. The scientific community represented in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is saying you must reduce the global emissions of greenhouse gases by 43 to 45% by 2030, by 60% by 2035, and go carbon neutral in 2050. If you want to keep to the target, which was fixed in Paris in 2015, and that was to limit the increase in temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius. That is about a little less than 3 degrees Fahrenheit compared to pre-industrial levels. So you're talking about 1840. Now, what is happening? Instead of complying with the verdict of the scientific community, we were very proud of the fact that climate actions, climate related policies were dictated by the scientific community. But the scientific community, their verdicts, their opinions, their advice is being ignored. So, this is a huge challenge. On the one hand, we are seeing that emissions have grown instead of reducing.
Sir, what do you expect? Do you think something substantial could come up, or we can have something in this COP28?
Well, they'll have to decide on,
or it would be another discussion.
Effective. What happens is that you establish partnerships. Like one of the things they are going to discuss is the G20. G20 in India decided that the renewable energy should be tripled. The amount of energy that is produced by fossil fuels, I mean, by green sources, should be tripled. So they will have to agree on how it will be tripled. There has to be financial means, there has to be institutional means, there has to be a whole partnership, a global partnership. The main point, Tahir, is this. Climate change has happened because of the use of fossil fuels for production of energy. Climate change has happened secondarily because deforestation has taken place. And climate change has happened because we have modernized, industrialized our agriculture, we have industrialized the transport system. All of them are energy intensive and they're using energy which comes from fossil fuels. So, what is the answer? The answer is have electricity, have energy produced by clean sources. It has been established in countries like Pakistan and India and Africa. The renewable energy, solar is much cheaper than fossil fuel based energy. So these things are going to be discussed in Dubai. The second most important issue that will be discussed is what you referred to, which was the loss and damage fund. The Pakistani delegation led by Sherry Rahman in COP27 in Egypt, in Sharm el Sheikh, used the floods in Pakistan, the mega floods, to draw attention to the demand of developing countries from 1990 onwards that there should be a special funding mechanism to compensate countries for losses that are irreparable and damage that is repairable but expensive. So, because of the Pakistani floods and the way the Pakistan delegation effectively projected the floods, the Secretary General also lent his invaluable support to that. He kept on saying, if you want to know what climate change does, go to Pakistan. So it was decided to set up the fund. But the details, how much money should there be in the fund, where should it be located, who should pay, who should receive the money, all these operational details were left to be determined by a transitional committee of how many? 24. 10 from the rich countries, 14 from developing countries.
Which
Now,
which is still pending.
It is still pending. They've just had a meeting yesterday, the meeting in Abu Dhabi. They have reached agreement, but the Americans are actually raising obstacles.
Why?
The Americans insist. Their worry is that whenever you have a mandatory system of funding, they will have to pay the major share, 25%.
Yes.
Because that's their share of the UN budget. So they insist that this fund should be called a voluntary fund. Developing countries say that if you make it voluntary,
but nobody will volunteer then.
Nobody will volunteer. You will get, the Americans say we have very rich charities. And now Buffett has more money than so many countries. And Bill Gates has more money than so many countries. So that is going to be a big issue. The developing countries have agreed through the transitional committee.
Sir, do you think one of the worry of the United States is that if they agree and all the time they need to pay whenever something happen, then they'll be forced to cut hydrocarbon or the petroleum use in their own countries, and the lobby is politically too strong, that hydrocarbon lobby in United States, and it has political connotations.
Actually, in developed countries of the world, it is relatively easier to reduce because they have shifted the manufacturing to China, to India, to Vietnam, to Thailand. Now, all the cars that you get in Pakistan are produced in Thailand. So, Japan can reduce its emissions. And most of the emissions in the rich countries come from the what we call the style of life, lifestyle.
Centralized
Because centralized
heating
air conditioning
and hot
and
swimming
people are
pools.
sitting in t-shirts and shorts while it is freezing outside. So basically, and they don't want to abandon that, but they will have to do that. But so the loss and damage is another fund. There is a need for a much faster and just transition to clean energy in the world.
In just one sentence, what do you expect from the COP? And what Pakistan should expect from the COP?
Well, Pakistan should, I hope, the fund will definitely become operationalized
All right.
with certain questions, with certain problems, but it will be operationalized. So Pakistan should prepare. Nobody gives money without
Projects.
without projects, without documentation, without proving how establishing a governance system that this is how we will use your $5 million. And what you're going to have is a new partnerships. There are now, it's becoming very fashionable to have partnerships for energy, partnerships uh, for other aspects of environmental action. So the COP will definitely achieve results. After all, when you have so many people meeting and discussing, and they come up with,
Should we go there with our finger crossed, or should we go there with some hope?
we should go with some hope, because if you don't have hope, the international system will not survive, will not
Right.
endure.
So these are I mean, it's an uphill task. The world knows that it's going down the drain, but the status quo is reluctant, or they are willing, but they're not that, very promptly, they're not coming in. So let's see. And the second thing, the second result, that if I want to summarize, is that Pakistan should expect something from the loss and damage fund, but we should go prepared, documentation wise, on ideas, on table, on ground, and have concrete projects that those are deliverables. So these are few things. So I think the government need to put its act together and build upon the platform that was created last year. That's all up till now. Let's meet in the next program. Goodbye.